Hey guys, John, Deer Addiction. You don't need beetles or a taxidermist to make a clean Euro mount. This is a simple step-by-step method you can do at home, and I'll show you exactly how, start to finish. Come along. First, I'll show you how I got the skull I worked on in this video.
Oh, his other antler just came off. An antler.
We're going to do a Euro mount on a buck that popped his antlers off right after he was shot. We're going to take him down, take as much meat off as possible first, and then we'll work on the boils.
So we got our deer head skinned out. I like to remove the eyeballs as well. You can carve around them, and you get the next step is you get your propane cooker. You can use a turkey fryer or whatever. I use a pan here. This is a stainless pan you might see at a buffet. It is about inside dimensions, about 19.5 inches by a foot by 6 inches deep. This is just a little small for an elk skull, but it works great for deer. I've actually done 3 deer at once. And you want your deer basically to look like this when you're ready to go. You want to get the large pieces of meat off. You can take a knife and run it, go all the way in. There's a section, you can see it connects from the bottom of the skull, from the bottom through to the top. You see that? You can take a knife and just punch it through and then kind of hacksaw around in a circle around the orbit, and then the eye itself will come loose. There's a whole bunch of retroorbital fat there. And then you'll see the ear hole, and I've already done this, but you basically will see the ear hole, and you punch a knife in about that far, and you take a knife or a hammer, push that in through the hole with a small size screwdriver, and then you just wiggle it and crack it open, pop it open. Once you do that, you'll get out a couple bones, and then if you have antlers, it's fine. You can rest it right on the antlers. Of course, this one's antlers fell off. But you rest it on some cardboard or something, and you see this smooth section? Just above that on either side, you take a flathead screwdriver and you take a hammer and you angle in just a little bit. So this would be vertical. This is in just a little bit. Take a hammer and punch it through, and it'll go where there's a thin spot, and that'll open up. There's the brainstem coming out, and that takes you into the calvarium where you can get all the brain matter out. And it's way easier if you do this before you do the first simmer. And you want to get this just kind of, for this phase, when you're using the soap and the bicarb, your antlers can be in the water. It won't discolor them. I've done it many times. It doesn't discolor them. Once you get to the peroxide level, the whitening, you do not want that to happen. So we're going to start the boil here. We will open up the garage to give some aeration here because, of course, we don't want carbon monoxide poisoning. So we'll crack that open, have some good ventilation. We'll boil this for 2 to 4 hours at low. We won't quite boil it. I use the word boil. We'll take it to a simmer. You don't want it boiling. If it gets to boiling, that's okay, but back it off from that and then run it for 2 to 4 hours. The longer you do it, the easier it'll be for the first pressure wash, and the more you get off the first pressure wash, the cleaner the second one will go. This is a good activity for a day when you're doing other stuff around the house, because it'll be about 8 hours from start to finish. There's 3 parts. The first is with soap. I watched one that said Dawn dish soap, but I've used Gain. I already got quite a bit in this one because it's a leftover. I'll just put a little more in there. And then, but the first time if you do it, there'll be quite a bit. I guess I would use a third of this big container. This is sodium bicarb, or baking soda. This helps break down the tissue and comes off easier when you go to pressure wash it. So you got to get it stirred in there. I put it right on top of the skull. And then finally, when it comes time, we'll use a hydrogen peroxide. I purchased this off of Amazon. It cost about 30 bucks. 12% hydrogen peroxide. That's different than your home hydrogen peroxide, which is 3%. 12% does a much better job. I've used the 3%. It makes it kind of white. This makes it much more aesthetically pleasing. Get it good and centered on the burner. I'll put the jaw in too. 2 to 4 hours. One of the problems with this is that when it's cold out, you got to be careful of your pressure washer freezing up, and it's in the teens here, Fahrenheit. It's hot water, so you got to be careful. You can see stuff starting to separate off there. Tissue starting to fall off. Now this will be the degreasing boil, and this is the one that you can use, save it if you've got other ones you think you might do during that year. You can put it back in a bucket because it's mainly a degreasing boil. You've gotten the bulk of the tissue off, so you can reuse that, add the baking soda, and use that as the first round of boiling before you move to a new clean amount of water for the second degreasing boil. So just a good amount of soap. This is 5 gallons of water, and this is 90 fluid ounces. I'm gonna say I might put a quarter of that. So 25 ounces of soap. I just use an old paint stick to kind of stir it up a little bit. You don't need to do a lot of stirring because, I mean, you're not going to take this to a boil. You're just going to simmer. Between the first boil and the second, these are those holes that I punched out on the skull. These are your eyes. Here's where I punched out. I went along that ear hole and broke out when I talked about that ear hole and broke that line out when I was showing you earlier. And then we took that screwdriver, the flathead screwdriver, and punched out. That gets you into the brain. You can see some brain matter still in there. That will come out easier here. But if you can pull that out before this boil, that will expedite. So I use a pair of curved hemostats that you can get off of Amazon.
After pressure washing, you can save the water in a 5-gallon bucket and put a lid on it and save it for future boils. The next water will be all clean. You wash out the container real thoroughly, get all the soap out, and then add the 12% peroxide. I add a couple cups of that, and then you start with cold water, and you wrap the antlers with saran wrap, and then cover it very tightly, the lower part with black electrical tape. Pay very close attention to the very base of the antler. Once you get that wrapped very tightly, then you soak it in the water. That part can go into the water, but you don't want the antler itself to touch that hydrogen peroxide water because that can bleach the antler. There are some saves for that. I can show you later if you happen to get a little bit of it bleached, but you really want to avoid that. So I use a 4-inch plastic wrap. That works better, but you can just use your clear plastic wrap in the kitchen, but it's just more unwieldy being, near 12 inches. Now we've done the peroxide. You can see right now the sutures show up really dark because they're still wet, but as it dries out and tomorrow morning this will be snow white. So it'll look great. It's unusual that I have one that is a shed buck. If this helped you and you want more off-season DIY hunting projects like this, there's another build project linked here that you'll probably find useful. Thanks for watching, guys and gals. We'll see you next time.